Russian armored personnel carriers and tanks begin advancing toward Ukrainian defensive lines. Using the terrain to their advantage, the armored units infiltrate toward a wooded area and continue their push for some time. Then, suddenly, one of the tanks is rocked by a violent explosion. The tank has struck a mine. The crew abandons the damaged vehicle and withdraws. The incident slows the convoy's advance. As the tank burns, some elements pull back and try an alternate route, but that new path leads them straight into a minefield. The reconnaissance detachment is neutralized. Tanks and armored vehicles are destroyed. At the same time, a Ukrainian UAV operator detects a large Russian convoy on the move. Coordinates are relayed rapidly to the nearest artillery battery, which opens fire with cluster munitions. Effective for wide-area strikes. One of the salvos scores a hit on a Russian tank. Ukrainian tanks and assault groups reach the front. Infantry dismount from their armored vehicles and begin supporting nearby units. During this phase, enemy forces attempt to hit a Bradley-type vehicle with an RPG, but the attack fails. The remaining armored vehicles continue to engage and press the fight. On another sector, Ukrainian soldiers spot a different Russian convoy approaching from a separate direction. A Russian soldier in the convoy notices a UAV and fires at it. Russian tanks attempt to reposition and try new tactics. Yet to advance, they must pass through multiple wooded areas and minefields. The lead tank is immobilized by an explosion. A second tank, though aware of the danger, keeps moving and is soon put out of action by a powerful blast. Ukrainian artillery seizes the opportunity and pounds the stranded Russian vehicles with concentrated fire. Despite severe losses, Russian forces attempt to regroup, but the outcome of that persistence remains uncertain. Even if they launch a fresh assault, Ukrainian units are prepared. Another armored personnel carrier detonates a mine and is destroyed. A tank trying to cross the minefield is also eliminated. Only 2 vehicles are left operational. Instead of withdrawing, some armored elements push forward. They fail to detect the mines and drive over them. Ultimately, Russian forces exhaust their last chances, and the operation collapses when the convoy reaches the minefield. It becomes clear the operation was doomed from the start. Before the battle began, the adversary had already made a weak start, losing its first armored personnel carrier. As they advanced, a tank hit a mine and suffered heavy damage. Rather than ordering a retreat, commanders directed movement across open ground. Under intense Ukrainian defensive fire, the tanks were forced to fall back. The previously damaged vehicle was engulfed in flames. Another tank, attempting an alternate route, entered a mined woodland and was destroyed. Yet another armored personnel carrier repeated the same mistake and found itself stranded in the middle of a minefield. The disabled vehicles then became targets for FPV drone strikes. One of the tanks came under heavy fire, while a simultaneous new attack was launched. This time, 3 armored personnel carriers were pushed forward. An unmanned aircraft rapidly dove into the second carrier and scored a direct hit. The lead vehicle tried to accelerate and push through, but struck a concealed mine. The explosion sent up dense smoke, and the vehicle quickly caught fire. The armored vehicle behind it was also hit. UAV strikes continued relentlessly. One more hit destroys another vehicle. When the Azov unit identifies a separate enemy column, they move immediately. The Russian side decides to send 2 armored personnel carriers ahead to reach the village and dig defensive positions. They manage to slip quietly to the outer edges of the village in a short time, but the UAVs reacted quickly. First, an FPV drone struck, followed by another UAV carrying an explosive. That strike put one armored vehicle out of action, while another reached the village boundary, but could not overcome the mine directly ahead of it. A Ukrainian tank moved in to provide support. The UAV strikes were relentless. When an armored personnel carrier entered the tank's effective firing arc, it detonated. And the advance ground to a halt at the village's edge. The drones delivered their explosives with precision, and scored a direct hit on an armored vehicle. The second personnel carrier hit a mine and was rendered inoperable. Immediately afterward, an attack aircraft scored a direct strike on a Russian tank. The new wave of assault was stopped before it could begin. That tank had been due to lead the next convoy. The column included 2 more tanks and 3 additional armored personnel carriers. But Ukrainian forces were lying in wait, prepared and ready. The result of the opening strike was immediate. The convoy could not continue. One of the APCs detonated a mine while attempting to maneuver backward. Another was struck directly by an FPV drone. Elements attempting to withdraw struck additional mines on the return route and suffered even heavier losses. The stunned Russian troops were left uncertain what to do. One carrier attempted a wide, evasive maneuver to escape the trap, but suffered the same fate, and was rendered unusable. Before long, the area filled with the wreckage of Russian armored vehicles. The assault ended in total failure. Attacks on convoys have long played a decisive role in modern warfare. They often determine whether an army can sustain forward forces or must halt offensives due to shortages of supplies and reinforcements. Throughout history, logistics have been described as the lifeblood of any military operation, and convoys represent the visible, mobile backbone of that lifeline. For that reason, convoys have always been high-value targets for forces seeking to weaken an enemy without engaging in costly direct battles. From the large-scale mechanized battles of World War II to contemporary conflicts such as the war in Ukraine, the methods and technologies used to strike convoys have continually evolved. During World War II, the Battle of the Atlantic stands as one of the clearest examples of how devastating convoy attacks can be. Allied merchant ships carrying food, ammunition, and fuel were relentlessly hunted by German U-boats, inflicting heavy losses that threatened Britain's survival. Though tactics have changed, the underlying principles remain valid today. In modern conflicts, the rise of unmanned aerial systems, advanced surveillance technologies, and precision-guided munitions has transformed convoy warfare. Forces no longer rely solely on infantry ambushes or sudden air attacks. They can detect and strike convoys from well behind the front lines with surgical precision. FPV drones, loitering munitions, and cheap commercial UAVs give defenders a cost-effective way to harass, delay, and destroy enemy convoys. A typical military convoy may include armored vehicles, tanks, infantry carriers, fuel tankers, repair trucks, and logistical trucks carrying food, ammunition, spare parts, and medical supplies. These convoys sustain frontline units and enable rapid movement. When supply lines are cut or delayed, operations falter and forward forces can be stranded without fuel, ammunition, or casualty evacuation options. Convoy routes are therefore usually kept under strict security and planned in detail. Planners typically select routes with multiple alternatives and try to minimize the time convoys spend exposed on open ground. Still, in places like Ukraine, where wide fields, forests, and small villages create natural choke points, convoys often have little choice but to follow predictable paths. That reality makes them vulnerable to ambushes and precision strikes, especially where defenders enjoy good situational awareness through reconnaissance drones and local intelligence networks. One notable feature of the current conflict is how effectively small drone teams have been integrated into defensive tactics. Ukrainian forces have pioneered widespread use of FPV drones to strike individual vehicles within moving convoys. These UAVs can track convoys without being detected, wait for the optimal moment, and then strike tanks, trucks, or armored personnel carriers directly. When combined with extensive minefields and accurately placed artillery, this capability has made movement for Russian convoys in contested areas extremely hazardous and costly. An ambushed convoy often descends into chaos. A single vehicle hitting a mine or taking a direct drone hit can block narrow routes, trap following vehicles, and create prime targets for artillery or follow-up drone strikes. Abandoned or destroyed vehicles become obstacles that complicate recovery efforts and force units to expose themselves while clearing wreckage, opening them to further attack. Protecting a convoy therefore requires a blend of old and new measures. Route security teams must perform advanced reconnaissance for mines and ambushes. Electronic warfare units may attempt to jam hostile UAVs, and air defense assets should escort larger convoys to counter the drone threat. Traveling at night or in poor weather can reduce detection risk, but those measures also slow movement and raise the chances of mechanical failure or getting lost. In some cases, decoy convoys are employed to draw enemy fire away from real supply lines. Building effective traps, however, demands resources and coordination that may be unavailable during high-tempo operations with already strained supply lines. Ultimately, convoy attacks remind planners and commanders that wars are not won by firepower alone. The ability to move people and materiel efficiently and to protect those movements often determines the outcome of operations. Disrupting an opponent's supply lines can force retreats, abandoned equipment, or the loss of offensive momentum just when an attack seems imminent. As AI-guided UAVs, improved sensors, and more autonomous weapons evolve, convoy strikes will likely become even more precise and harder to defend against. For now, though, well-placed mines, clever drone tactics, and reliable local intelligence continue to demonstrate that even heavy armored formations remain vulnerable against determined, well-organized defenders.